I'm interested, Elif, in your views on Sufism. It's not a subject that I know very much about. Can you tell me some stuff about it?
Well, I became interested in mysticism actually in my early 20s when I was a student in university, and it wasn't something that I had seen around me, but I had started reading about it, and one book led to another and then another. I started reading about Shams of Tabriz, Rumi, Ibn Arabi, and because it's such a vast ocean, in my opinion, if you're interested in Islamic mysticism, you can easily find yourself reading about Jewish mysticism. And as you keep reading about Jewish mysticism, you can easily find yourself reading about Christian mysticism. The way I see it, there are no boundaries. And I honestly think if you brought the mystics of different traditions together around the same dinner table, I honestly think they would break bread together. So like someone like Meister Eckhart, someone like Rabia, Rumi, Isaac Luria, Teresa de Avila, these people had something in common. They lived in different ages, different places, but their quest was very similar. Now that said, personally, I'm not a believer. I'm not a religious person. I'm just someone who's curious about faith, but I'm equally curious about doubt. And I think they need to go hand in hand. We should not try to separate them. So my problem with people who are religious is that they're trying to get rid of doubt. But faith without doubt is a dogma, and dogmas are very dangerous. On the other hand, my problem with people who are strictly, rigidly atheist is that they want to get rid of faith. But I think there are so many different acts of faith in our lives, and also secular acts of faith as well. For instance, when you move to a new country without quite knowing what you're doing, that's a secular act of faith. When you start writing a novel, you have no idea where that story is going to take you. It's a secular act of faith. When you fall in love with someone, you don't know if that person is going to make you happy in life, but you follow this weird urge, right? Something irrational. That's a secular act of faith. So there are acts of faith that are not religious. That's all I'm trying to say. And that is why I've never felt close to certainty. I don't like certainty. I like people who say, you know what, I'm still working on it. I'm still thinking. I'm still on some journey, changing. So I think I've always felt closer to agnostics and also to mystics who were a little bit of misfits, just on the edge of their traditions, walking a very thin line between faith and doubt. Those people were very interesting. And there's a part of me that wants to remember that philosophy, because most of that philosophy, or the questions that they raised, have been either censored or forgotten or erased. So I'm not, as I said, believer myself, but I'm a liberal, I'm a progressive-minded person who is interested in faith. And I think, again, people on my side of the political spectrum haven't put enough thought into faith. I think faith is way too important to leave to the ultra-religious. I think patriotism is way too important to leave to nationalists. I also think the tech world is way too important to leave solely to tech companies. And I also think politics is way too important to leave it only to career politicians. So in all these fields, I think we have to become more engaged, more committed, part of the conversation.
Yes. If there is a corollary to the findings of mystics across traditions, is what interests you the possibility that there is, whilst I take your point about certainty, if you say that Rumi and Meister Eckhart and mystics across traditions have at least a timbre, a tone, something that seems similar, is part of the appeal that the sense that that isn't the point of mysticism, that there is access to a truth that is super material?
The way I see it, of course, everyone interprets mysticism in a different way. And actually, the Sufis used to say there are as many paths to God as the number of hearts beating for God. So that, again, plurality, multiplicity. You should not try to dictate, unlike orthodoxies, that are saying my way is the right way and everybody should follow my way. There's room for multiplicity in a proper mystical philosophy, in my opinion. But what I like is, first of all, they say, when you look at the mystics of the past ages, and I always talk about history because there are people who call themselves Sufis today, but in my opinion they can be just as patriarchal, just as hierarchical as the rest of the society. So I don't romanticize anyone, but I'm interested in the philosophy itself. I'm interested in the poetry of mysticism. And when I read that poetry, what they're saying, these ancient mystics, is whatever exists outside of me also exists inside me. Maybe, in smaller degrees or in bigger degrees. That also means don't be too harsh when you judge other people. Maybe you're upset at someone because that person is very jealous. Well, you know what? You have a degree of jealousy inside you too. Don't forget. So that is a very beautiful philosophy. It's much more inward looking. Rather than fighting with other people, you have to be very much aware of your own ego and how that can keep blocking your way. And there's also a sense of connectivity in mystical thought. We're all connected. So if there was a geometrical shape to symbolize mystical thought, I think it would be a circle, because in a circle every little point is at equal distance from the center. So the idea is we're all part of this whole, and we're all creating meaning together. I'm not superior to the tree. I'm not superior to anyone else. It's not hierarchical. It's much more egalitarian, and there's room for gender equality. So those are the things that I like. But as I said, without over romanticizing, just to remember. One more point maybe. When I read people like Ibn Arabi, he has this beautiful poem. They ask him, what's your religion? And in answer to that question, he says, I follow the caravan of love. He says, if the caravan goes to a mosque, I will go inside the mosque, I will pray inside the mosque is my abode of prayer. But the caravan will continue. Maybe next stop will be a synagogue, and then we'll be praying inside a synagogue, I will be. And then we will stop by a church, and I will go and light a candle inside the church. I'm just telling you as I remember the poem. But the caravan will continue. Then we will pass through a desert, and I will pray in the desert. Then through a forest, then I will pray inside the forest. What he says is, the journey is endless. So that is why there's a big difference between organized religions and personal, inward-looking spirituality. Because the latter is a very individual quest. You might start up as a Buddhist, you might end up as a Christian mystic, or the other way around. Who am I to judge you? It's your personal story. Organized religions are not close to my heart. I think they divide humanity constantly into us versus them, and there is the assumption that us is closer to truth than them. But spirituality on this individual basis, in my opinion, is something else, and everyone's search is unique, like our fingerprints, and no one has the right to judge someone else's journey.
Thanks for watching this podcast and going all the way to the end of it. Would you so kind as to click the bell, it might not be there, over there, and subscribing so that we can infiltrate your serenity and peace of mind with jangling bells and buzzes. Thank you.